Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 6 of my object-oriented design tutorial. Today I'm going to create what I like to call better sequence diagrams. I'm going to take the sequence diagram that I created last time, and I'm going to improve on it dramatically and make it so that if someone sees one of your sequence diagrams, they have no doubt exactly what the final program should look like. So let's get into it. Okay, so in the last part of the tutorial, this is the sequence diagram that we created. And let me tell you, this is normally the type of sequence diagram I get. It is a sequence diagram that I don't consider to be complete, but this is normally what you're going to get. You're going to get a couple random notes. You're going to get the main objects defined. You're going to have some references that BankComputer, for example, holds the account object, and you're going to get things like that. I don't particularly like sequence diagrams like this. And what I'm going to show you in this tutorial is exactly how I would change it to make it 100% understandable to a programmer who would be under me and whose job would be to design this ATM software that we've been working on. So, what don't I like about it? Let's just move ourselves over here and give ourselves a little bit of room. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of classes that are missing. One of them would be my test class. Now very often that is never defined. So I'm going to call this test ATM. And this is going to be the actual application's name. And I'm just going to leave it here as a cyan blue. Another thing that is missing also is account. So I'm going to go and get myself another one of these guys, and I'm going to name this account. See, my job here is to make it so that you can make sequence diagrams and understand pretty much any type of sequence diagram you would get, and know how to make a sequence diagram that anybody can look at and immediately turn into a program without even looking at use cases or anything else. Another thing that wasn't defined is card. Another guy that was created here sort of was customer, but customer wasn't completed as well as I would have liked. And I'm just going to leave this as orange. Then we're going to have BankComputer, which was sort of defined, but there were some notes that basically said refer to other things, and I just don't like doing that. So I'm going to actually come in here and actually define some things with BankComputer. BankNetwork, that was also not defined very well. Just some references that everything that goes to BankComputer goes through BankNetwork, so I'm not very happy with that. So I'm going to make a couple notes there and a couple changes. And then I'm also going to refer to ATM because pretty much everything after that is pretty good. And then the final thing that was not defined is transaction. What we were told was transaction lies inside of ATM, but we didn't get any real specifics on exactly what transaction did, except for a simple note. Notes are good, but for the most part, it's much better if you can just define everything straight outwards. Now, the first thing we're going to do is go into test ATM, and then we're going to think about what our application is going to need to do. And we're going to walk ourselves through the whole process of creating the application. Now, a lot of people say, don't do this. Don't make these complicated, complete sequence diagrams. But I would disagree with that because I would much prefer to hand somebody something where they know exactly what they're going to get rather than come to me numerous times thereafter asking me questions. And I think whenever you create incomplete sequence diagrams, that's pretty much the type of environment you are inviting yourself into. So I know that test ATM is going to do at least 4 different things. So let's think about what those 4 different things are going to do. Well, the very first thing it's going to do is it's going to create an account, because we need an account before we're going to be able to actually do anything. So let's just throw account inside of here and define how we're going to use account. So my whole idea here is I'm going to create an account based off of customer information, and then that information is later on going to be passed into BankComputer. So of course we're going to have to create that, and then BankNetwork, and then BankComputer goes into BankNetwork, and so forth and so on. So let's think about how we're going to create the account. And I'm just going to come in here and define account, which is my constructor for my account object. And there's attribute and classes, which I'm going to have to define. Now, I'm going to have a bank ID, and that's going to be an integer because I'm going to need that information to be able to go into BankNetwork and then find BankComputer. Every single object that is inside of BankComputer is going to have a bank ID to separate them. What else am I going to need? I'm probably going to need a customer name. That's going to make some sense based off of the usage case that we did before. If you're not quite getting it, just stick here with me. You'll get it by the end. We're going to need account type because remember, in our usage case, we said that they're going to be able to access either checking or savings. And account balance, of course. Every single account's going to have a balance to know how much money they can access, and in that situation, that is going to be a double. And very often people type real in here. That is what you're supposed to type, but I think double is much better. And then also a PIN. So there's going to be all the different things that we're going to want to define whenever we create our account constructor. And then just to make sure that everyone is well aware that a create is going on here, we're going to be creating something new. I'm going to come in here and say create account. So everybody is definitely positive an account is being created. Well, then what do we need to do? Well, we're going to have to create a card. And then we have to think about how we're going to create card and what information needs to be inside of card. And this is going to be much more simple. We're going to create a card. This is the card constructor we're going to be calling. And what do we need? Well, the account already has the PIN inside of it. See? Right here, PIN. So why don't we just go inside of there, since it's already created and it already has the PIN, why don't we just get it from there? So I'm going to say account get PIN, and there we go. Now we know that that is going to actually have to be inside of there, and that is going to be an integer. And then account get strip number, and there is strip number, and that is going to be the number that is on the card. So there we are. Well, now you might be thinking about, okay, well, what type of information is going to be stored inside of account, and what is strip number exactly? And remember, let's not forget to come down here and say create card. Even though it's obvious, what the heck, we just took a half of a fraction of a second and made it 100% obvious. So I like to come in here and actually think about, based off of the things we talked about in our use case, how exactly we should create all these different things. Account type, based off of the previous sequence diagram, it basically says A1 for savings. Let's stretch this out a little bit. And this is just going to be a little note attached to account, or A2 for checking. So now we know that that is what it's going to be, that if that has a value of 1, account type, this guy right here, and we also know that account type is going to be passed as a letter, so we could also put another note inside of here that says whenever you pass in a S or a string that begins with S, assign 1 to account type, or C, assign the value of 2 for account type. But we'll get more into that here in a second. So we're going to put in another little note, this in constructor. So there we go. So there's a little bit more information. It's going to make it a little bit easier for us to be able to understand what type of numbers we have here. But we need some more numbers. For example, account number. What exactly is account number and how is it going to be structured whenever we create it? Well, if I didn't tell the programmer, they're not going to know. Account number is going to be equal to the strip number with a 1 or 2 from account type at the end. So the strip number is going to be the same for the card, and then if you want to create a savings account based off of that card, which you see 1 for savings, we're going to strap a 1 at the end of the strip number, or a 2 for account type to the end of the strip number if it is a checking account. And this comes from the usage case as well. And let's think about some other things that we need to think about. What is account number and how are we going to create account number? I think what makes sense is to say account, and I'm doing all this out of my head, by the way. So if I miss anything, then don't murder me. I on purpose waited a couple days to go in here and recreate this, and I have the sequence diagram that I originally created in the last tutorial in front of me, and I'm trying to improve it. So there we go. So I'm going to have an account number incrementer inside of here, and that's going to be a field name, and it's going to start off at 100,000 and increment when you add a new account. So that is going to be the center of every account number. And then what are we going to have? We're going to have a 1 or a 2 if it's a checking versus if it's a savings account. So how are we going to generate our strip numbers? That means we got to put another node inside of here. I can see I'm running out of space over here. So let's put a little node in here to help the programmer figure out how to generate my strip number. Well, I'm going to say that generate strip number is going to be a method inside of here, and it's going to get strip number by adding bank ID to this guy right here, account number incrementer, right like that. So now we know where the strip numbers come from, the account numbers, the account type, and we also know about account number incrementer and how it is going to make sure that all the accounts have a different number. So let's give a little bit more information again on my strip number, and I'm going to say strip number. Remember, strip number is going to be the number on my credit card. Strip number is 8 digits, and I'm going to say the first one, or the first two in this situation, is going to be the bank ID, and I'll just say the rest, account number minus checking or savings code, which is that 1 or 2. So there we go. Now we know a heck of a lot more about these different fields that are going to exist, and all of these are going to exist inside of account. And you could draw little lines here from these notes over to account. Okay, so now that we have account created and we've defined a whole bunch of things, or all the different things that might be confusing inside of the creation of the account, and we've also created the card, now it's time to create customer. Remember previously, we go over here, there's nothing defined inside of a customer except that this method right here is going to be called, and I don't particularly like that, so I'd like to change it. So I'm going to come in here, and this should line up pretty well with what we had previously set as a sequence diagram. Now, what's going to go on here? Well, I like using a lot of the setup inside of the constructor. So I'm going to say here, customer, and everything I'm doing here is going to be available in a link underneath the video. If you want to take a look at it and really understand this stuff, I would say it's a good idea to do that. So I'm going to say customer's ATM card of type card is going to be passed to this. And I think pretty much everything is going to be able to be defined from that point on. And then what are we doing here? We're also going to create customer. Much more understandable. And then what is customer going to do for us? Well, it's basically going to do what it did over here. And we're also going to know exactly how this locks up. Take that. And everything else is defined pretty well in the previous sequence diagram. So I'm just going to let it like this. I think that works pretty well. It's just going to continue on. I don't want to change anything. I don't want to change the sequence diagram at all. But there's a couple things that I think just need to be changed to make this 100% understandable. Okay, so now what? Well, BankComputer, I'd like to shore up some things here in regards to how is test ATM, or the actual application, going to create BankComputer. And I can see here already that I'm going to need a whole bunch more of these guys, so I might as well just make them. And now I'm going to take BankComputer over here, and let's define how the BankComputers are going to be created. Well, what do you guess? I'm probably going to call the BankComputer constructor, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So this is going to be BankComputer. And what am I going to pass over to BankComputer? Well, let's say I want to have a bank name. Okay, I'm going to have to refer to those a lot. Can't think of anything else that I'm going to need, so bank name it is. And for now, that's the way it's going to be. And create BankComputer. And because the previous sequence diagram pretty much defined that, the way the BankComputer should work, I'm just going to go grab myself a little note, throw it down inside of here, and I'm going to say everything continues as designed in first, design after this. Okay, so I'm defining that I need a BankComputer. And I'm just walking through the whole entire process of I need an account, I need a card, I need a customer, I need a BankComputer, so that I can put all these things together and they all make a lot of sense. Well, then what do I need? Well, I'm going to need BankNetwork because I'm going to have to stick BankComputer inside of BankNetwork. Got that guy over here, and this guy was previously completely disregarded. And I'm going to grab this just to make sure that anybody that looks at it can see instantly what that is referring to. Okay, now how am I going to come in here and create BankNetwork? And BankNetwork, I can't think of anything that I need to do with BankNetwork. So I'm just going to create an empty constructor and close it off like that. And then we can come in here and go create BankNetwork. And there we are. Now what I need to do? Well, I'm going to, since I've already created my bank, the BankComputer, I need to add BankNetwork or add BankComputer to the BankNetwork because it contains all of those. So how exactly am I going to do that? I'm going to draw myself a little line over here. So now I'm going to define the method that I want called whenever I want a BankComputer attached to a BankNetwork because the BankNetwork contains all of them. And I'm just going to give this a real logical name. Add bank to network, and it's going to be the bank, and I'm going to pass the bank over. Pretty simple, and I don't need to put any types of other notes there. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. especially because it points over at BankNetwork. All right, so now what do I need to do? Well, I'm going to need to create my ATM, which is going to be very important. And I've already come over here in the previous sequence diagram and created ATM, see, and here's all the different calls to ATM. However, I'm going to be making these instead. I don't like the fact that this is set up as customer. Doesn't seem to make much sense to do it that way. So instead, I'm going to set it up as the application itself doing all this stuff. So I'm going to grab ATM and I'm just going to stick ATM like over here, and I'm going to define exactly how my ATMs are going to be created. And I'm sure you can guess ATMs are going to be created by calling the constructor file. And then what do I need for my ATM? Well, I need my bank network. That's pretty much it, because I want all the banks that go into all the bank networks, and there's only one bank network, so I want that sent over and stored inside of every ATM that I create. So there's that, and this creates ATM. So there's no doubt that is a constructor as well. Well, then what do I want to do with my ATM? Well, is strip readable? Well, you can see basically over here, is strip readable is going to be called. And then what else is going to be called? Insert pin. Well, I don't like that quite yet. Find bank associated with card. And I'm looking at this older guy here and trying to find ways that I can improve upon it. Find bank associated with card. And I on purpose kind of messed this up a bit just so I had to have some things to talk about. Now, find bank associated with card, that sort of sounds kind of okay. But I would much prefer is ATM cards bank in network. It just sort of, I mean, it's long, but it sort of makes a lot more sense. So I'm going to rename this is ATM cards bank in network, because that's exactly what I'm asking. So I want to do that. And then I'm just going to leave the card as it is. And then while I'm over here, why don't I go and make a couple other little changes? Like, for example, verify the PIN. Why am I passing over the card and the PIN? What I think makes a little bit more sense is to store that information inside of the transaction and then pass the transaction over to this guy. And that is exactly what I'm going to do here. So here, let's say I want to copy that, verify the PIN, leave the name the same. However, I've decided that I want transaction to have more power. So I'm going to go transaction, and the transaction object's going to be passed inside of there. And let's put a little X over top of it. And then I could also put in a note here. And just to make the note stand out a little bit better, I'm going to change its color to yellow. What I'm doing is I'm sort of like showing you things that I do. Changed method, because I think this makes a little bit more sense. Now, if I changed that way, I think I also am going to want to change a couple other different things. And I also feel like I want to put a little note inside of here that sort of defines exactly some things that I want to go on inside of this method. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say check if the BankComputer bank ID is equal to the transaction bank ID, and then call verify the PIN in BankComputer object if true, and verify PIN and the bank strip there. So I'm defining inside of here some things or changes that I want made. Basically what I'm saying is this is what I want BankNetwork to do before this information is passed over to the BankComputer. See, that's what I'm saying. So I want to make sure that BankNetwork actually has a job to do and does its job well. Well, now that I changed that, I'm probably also going to want to change request withdraw amount and just have the transaction passed over to this guy instead of also passing the card, because it doesn't make any sense to pass the card and the transaction. And I'm going to take this little X, use it again. So I'm going to X that out. And I'm also going to say that I changed the method on this. So this is sort of how to improve a sequence diagram. And of course, how to write good sequence diagrams from the beginning so you don't have to go in and do this again. And then here, what I'd like to do is say check if the BankComputer bank ID transaction again. And then I want to say that basically what I'm doing is I'm just verifying that the ID in the BankComputer is the same as the ID that is inside of transaction. This is just sort of something that's coming out of my head that I think makes sense to check. Sort of a security thing. And then call request withdraw amount inside of the BankComputer object if true. And then I want to verify that enough funds are in account, which is in essence what I'm doing right here. Say transaction amount, account amount, I'm changing or I'm checking to make sure that there is enough money to withdraw. So then since I made all these little changes here inside of this, I guess they weren't that little. I'd also like to come in here and do a couple other things, which is basically I'm just going to pay reference to the fact that, hey, you know what? I think that you guys need to pay more attention to BankNetwork and not leave it out of the sequence diagram. So I'm basically saying, you know, I'd like to change a couple things here, and this is why I made the changes to the sequence diagram, because you don't want to make changes to someone's sequence diagram without explaining yourself. And I'm going to say everything goes from ATM to BankNetwork and then to BankComputer, and I'm going to say using the same method calls or method names. So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm just shaping this up, and I would normally go in and completely recreate this whole entire sequence diagram, but because I'm limited in time here, I'm just going to skip that part. Leave that to you for homework if you'd like to do homework. Okay, so now ATM has been created. What do I want to do now? Well, let's look over here. Makes a lot of sense. The transaction, the object transaction, should be created inside of the ATM, which is where it normally would be created otherwise. So a whole lot of common sense pretty much going on here, because the ATM would hold all this information in regards to the transactions that go on. And then I'm going to define how we're going to create transaction. Well, guess what? I'm going to call the transaction constructor. And what am I going to pass the transaction constructor? The strip number should be more than enough, because that is going to be my current card that I'm going to be working with. And then I'm going to say create transaction, because that's exactly what I'm doing there. And I could also put in here a little note where ATM is going to be able to get the transaction, or the strip number, to help people along. I'm going to say get the strip number from customer's ATM card dot get strip number. So that is where that is going to be coming from. And way up here, you can see inside of this application, you can see that I created a customer, and all the strip number and all these other different things are going to be stored inside of it. So now I know exactly how I'm going to get strip number so that I can create a new transaction. And now ATM is going to have a whole bunch of things that are going to be going on, because it makes sense for ATM to have a whole bunch of things going on. I'm just actually going to delete that, because what's going on in this program? The customer is going to be dealing with the ATM. It's not going to be dealing with any of these other objects. So it makes a lot of sense for them to communicate with each other. So what sort of things are my application going to have to say over here to my ATM? Well, the same things that were already said over here on the right side of the screen in this transaction, which is insert PIN. That's going to be one of them. Pick account to access. That's going to be another one. Amount to withdraw. Then that is going to be another one. So let's copy those and move them over here. And this is done just purely to make sure that everything's being covered. And I'm going to leave this exactly the same. And a pin's being sent over. Pick account to access. And the amount to be withdrawn. And then the final part, and I could draw little arrows inside of here. I'm actually going to need one more of these guys. And this one is going to call the ATM and say I want all the transaction information after you are done with it. And it's going to spit it out on the screen. And I can throw in another node right down here to complete this picture. So there is a rundown of exactly how to sort of make a sequence diagram that's 100% understandable while working with other sequence diagrams that other people made, and some notes you can make to make the sequence diagram more understandable, and just some of the basic things that you have to think about whenever you're creating sequence diagrams. In the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how extremely easy it is to take this now shipshape, awesome sequence diagram and turn it into a class diagram. Leave any questions or comments below. Otherwise, till next time.